episode of Get Real with Jack and Cindy. I'm Cindy Morrison.
I'm Jack Wallace. Welcome, welcome. We are glad you are here, and we're glad to be here. We're back in the swing of things. So one of the things I want to talk about, we talked last week about sellers and overpricing and how we determine price. So I think it's really important that we go through kind of the three now classic, which I hate to say that I'll tell you why later, the three now classic ways that people sort of come to and arrive at pricing their house or valuing, let's say valuing their house. Because I think sometimes we get a little too concerned about pricing and valuing, you know what I mean? Like it's valuing. But the three basic ones, I would say, and you can disagree if you disagree, Zestimate, comparative market analysis, and an appraisal. So those are three distinct, different ways and approaches. Now you also have your tax record, AVM. You've got, there's all different ones, but those are really kind of the three that the public sort of understands and recognizes. Yes. Hopefully after today, you'll understand them a little bit better and what the nuanced differences are about all of them. Because I think for those of us that do this every day, we kind of understand how things are arrived at and on those three levels, those three different pricings. But I think the public sometimes think that they're all the same. And so we need to clarify that. They're not.
So let's start first with the Zestimate. And if you've been living under a rock and you have no idea what a Zestimate is, it's Zillow's estimate of your house. That is, they take into account tax records, what other homes have been selling for. It's all AI driven, so they're not going to know updates to your house.
So let's start with saying we love AI and everyone knows that. So this is not an anti-AI statement.
But this is where humans and AI work really well together.
Yes. And why we as agents will never be replaced, because the AI platform is great for giving you sort of a base average of what your property is worth. And, it's kind of a joke within our industry. We, kind of like a zai, like a lie, because because honestly, everybody looks at that. And if it works in their favor, it's the Bible. And if it's against him, it's the devil. So we're always up against. And then you get into, if the seller thinks it's way off, and a lot of times it is way off, and then the buyer goes, but the Zestimate says,
oh, how many times I've been in an open house and a buyer said, well, you have it priced at this, but the Zestimate says, I'm like, yeah, talk to the hand.
Yeah, except we have to explain that to them. And it's like, and it's so it's very important that you all understand this. But the Zestimate is looking, it's an AVM, an average value. It's looking, and average is the key word.
Not median, average.
Yeah. And if your house is absolutely cut, like a cookie cutter house that was built a few years ago with standard, and every other house in that neighborhood is the same house,
like a zero lot line neighborhood,
and everyone has maintained it exactly the same, and no updates or upgrades have happened, then it'd be dead on. But none of that happens.
Right.
None of that happens.
And it also doesn't take into account, yes, updates and upgrades, but also disrepair. It's not going to know if you haven't taken care of the wood rot on your house and there's wood rot everywhere. AI doesn't know that.
Or if you have 800 peers and your neighbor has none. In the same neighborhood, you can have one house that has structural issues and the other that doesn't. There's so many factors. Swimming pools, some neighborhoods means nothing. $100,000 swimming pool could give you zero value in certain neighborhoods. In another neighborhood, it could be that you have to have it. Yeah. And that's where a seasoned agent who knows the area, knows the neighborhood, is going to say, in this neighborhood, people want a pool. It's expected. in this neighborhood, you're going to have 50% of the public who wants it and 50% who do not want to deal with it.
Even if it's 50-50, sometimes 60-40, because there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who've had a pool. It's kind of like your boat. One of the best days in your life is when you buy the boat. Second best day in your life is when you sell the boat.
Yeah. So all those things factor in, but they don't with Zestimate. Now, the one thing that they do, which I think is where people get confused, is they do pull from public records. And so when you go on the tax record, it'll say that the house is in average shape, above average shape, and it will factor that in. So it doesn't just dead on take the number and make that, per square foot. The other thing that we as professionals do is if a house, stick with me, if a house is 1,000 square feet, then the square foot price, and let's say the square foot price is $100 a square foot. Okay. Then you go to a house that's 800 square feet and everyone assumes, oh, well, the square foot price is $100 a square foot. No. When you go down in square feet, you go up in square foot price. And so, so the 1,000 square foot house at 100 is 100,000. That does not mean that this one is 80,000. It's probably more like 90, 87. I mean, like you have to kind of tear it down because people are still getting a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's just 200 square feet less. So you're not taking all that money off. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And that's where let's go now to a compare. I don't want to spend too much time on Zillow. Let's go to I don't. It's a good tool for many things, but for your house price, it's not. Comparative market analysis. That is what a realtor prepares for you, is a comparative market. Actually, let's go to the appraisal next. We'll end on what we do.
Okay.
So now let's talk about an appraisal, which is kind of the exact opposite of the scale of a Zestimate in people's mind. Because to most people, appraisers, stick with me here because I respect what you do.
Absolutely.
I really, really do. And you spend a lot of time learning your craft, learning all of the rules, and it's admirable and it's professional and it's appreciated. However, you guys have to stick to certain standards and rules in order to justify to the bank, because that is really what the basic job of the appraisal is, so the bank doesn't get stuck with a property that they cannot sell because you have paid too much and they've loaned too much on that house. Does that make sense? You get an appraisal to make sure it isn't like the bank is like, oh, this just would be a great idea for you, Mr. and Mrs. Public. They are making sure that their investment is a good one. And that's really important. So the appraisal is, and that's why if the house was what we say in the business doesn't appraise, what does that mean? If it doesn't appraise, it means you put too much value for the house according to the appraisal, and the bank is only going to make the loan based on the appraisal.
And I've seen it where somebody's called out, had an appraiser appraise the price before they ever went on the market. And then the bank appraisal, again, is different than the original one because they're looking at if you could turn around and sell it next week, it would be different than just what this house appraises for.
Absolutely. So an appraiser would get offended, I think, a little bit if I say when it's a bank appraisal or if it's a public appraisal, like someone's paying to have an appraisal, that there's different. They really do try to stay in the same standard. However, I've seen differences. I really have. And the other side of it is,
and it can be different with just different, appraisers
100%.
coming in.
Oh, two appraisers are going to come up with two different prices. They'll come close, but they're going to come up with different prices because it's art and science together. And it is an art. And, that even down to, like, we always say, if you're going to get an appraiser, if you get assigned an appraiser who's from way away, who has no idea about it, you need to figure out if you can get that to where somebody not a particular person, but more somebody who knows the area better.
And sometimes you'll have that on VA loans, I've noticed, because there aren't that many appraisers that specialize in VA loans. So we've had them bring them from the outside, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's a formula, so it should hold up, but we live in it's just different in different markets. But so if you don't appraise, then we have to make up the difference. So that realtors are always like, we have to get to inspections and we have to get to appraisal. Once we've gotten through those things, then we can move really forward.
And explain. So what he's saying when we have to figure out the difference is, let's say your house is $200,000 and the appraisal comes in at 180 and your offer is $200,000. There's $20,000 there that either the buyer, the bank is going to say, we're only loaning for 180. They're either going to have to come up with the extra 20. Both of them are going to have to meet in the middle. Buyer comes up with 10,000 cash and seller reduces by 10,000, or the seller reduces all the way. If none of those things can happen with compromising,
then the deal blows and we move to the next buyer. The one thing the one thing too, we're getting a little bit off subject, but I think these are important things. Every loan,
off subject. Wait, what?
every appraisal is a little different. So you have an FHA appraisal. FHA is Federal Housing Authority, so it's backed by the government. So is VA. But they have their own standards, and so you can have what's called conditions with those, where you have to put in a guardrail, or handrail, you have to put on a new roof, you have to scrape old paint and repaint. It's not just value. It can also be sort of an inspection. It is not an inspection. You still need to have an inspection, but it's just
the bank's inspection to make sure that you are buying the value house that you are getting the
again,
loan
they don't
for.
want to have a house that has a problem with paint or isn't safe. So they're protecting their own. It's always about them protecting their own assets, which, we want our government to work correctly. So that's a good thing. Conventional is less standard. I mean, less conditioned. So whenever people are putting an offer, we often say, is the offer better than the other one? If the price is the same, what makes the difference? Well, the loan they're getting would make the difference, right? Because if someone's gonna bring cash, no appraisal, that's great. Or maybe they put that it's a condition of it, but if they don't, then great. But if they put conventional, I know it's going to be typically easier appraisal and no conditions compared to FHA. Now, some conventionals, I have had some where they've required some things,
right?
But it's not as common. It's just not as common. So, anyways,
cash is king. You don't have to have an appraisal if you don't want one.
Absolutely. And then the thing that that we all have to remember, though, is whenever an appraiser looks at the price, they can go 6 months, typically 6 months out, 6 months back. They look at closed properties. That's an important later. Closed properties, and sometimes pending a little bit, but mostly closed. And they are looking at as close to the subject property as they can, and as like the subject property as they can. So usually they can't go more than 1 mile distance from the front door of the house. So all that in mind, that is where their number comes from.
Which is difficult if you have a unicorn property, is what I call
it. And
them.
then they have to change their standard, and they have to explain that. They'll have to go out 5 miles or 10 miles if it's rural or urban, rural. Yeah, rural. Yeah. So those are expanded, but they have to be expanded because of a reason.
There are no homes the size of yours, or no homes the age of yours, that kind of thing. Like comparing apples to apples instead of apples to bananas.
And a good appraiser works really hard to figure out what the values are, what the offsets are. They have formulas. We add so much for this, we just decrease so much from this, and we try to get the prices to average out. So it's a very interesting for people who love numbers like I do and can geek out on it. It's awesome and it's great. The problem is it is also just an estimate. I mean, it is a very scientifically driven estimate, and it's an estimate that is driven by parameters that have been established with the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So the hope is it's as uniform, and they even call it uniform as possible, so that the bank can say to investors whenever a deal blows and they get the house back and suddenly this property can't be sold for anywhere near what we've loaned it to, and the bank is on the line, they can say, here's why we loaned that. Because we have an appraiser who said, and after 2008, a lot of appraisers got in a lot of trouble, some very unfairly, because they were valuing properties
based on 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and at the time, the market was just growing and growing and growing. So they were kind of meeting the market instead of using the past data. So it's kind of the opposite. So with that in mind, let's talk about why a CMA, a comparative market analysis.
Okay, before you go there, this is why pricing your home is so important, because if you overprice it and it doesn't appraise by the bank, again, it might not go through because a lot of people don't have $10, $20, $30,000 sitting there that's going to be over and above their loan because they've already had to come with their closing costs and their down payment and those kinds of things.
And if it's an FHA and that's the most likely buyer you're going to get, it's that whatever appraisal you get, it sticks for 6 months.
Yes.
So you can't just put it back on the market and get another FHA buyer who's going to get another appraisal who's going to come in higher.
And I've seen
people,
you
can get conventional, you can get cash.
I've seen people not check FHA if their house has not appraised, but hopefully that is a clue that maybe your pricing is off. But also, if you get what is an unfair appraisal, you can send in your comps and object. I'm trying to think of a better word, but object to that appraisal and try to fight it.
Yeah, and that's where you really want a person who's a good qualified realtor that can, what are the comps that we use to price your house to get to this, and to be able to go back and say, well, I mean, I've had many appraisals come up a little bit. If it's a big gap, it's pretty rare. The other thing too, you can even challenge if you've had another appraiser who came up with square footage differently, because the other thing that's changed, some of the standards have changed. And I had this recently with government. If any of the property is subsurface, that square footage credit, zero credit.
When did that happen?
It's actually a number of years ago, but it's dinged me on a couple of things. Then they can still give the value. They can still work it, but it can really throw things off because people are like, I thought I was getting a house that was this square footage and now it's this square footage. And I think it's unfair. I don't think it's fair, because I think that it's like, I understand they're trying to keep themselves, again, protect themselves. And if that could be flooded in their mind or seepage or whatever. But to me, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, especially like, I grew up in a house that's kind of partially like a walkout basement, almost kind of area. And we've never had that many, problems. So, I mean, I think it's just, it's an interesting thing, but that's just something to know. Like again,
so you
when
may
I
have
go to a listing
appraisal,
and they haven't sold it for a long time and they're in part of the ground, I'm like, okay, we may want to have this appraised before we put it on the market to the new standard, so that we're not going to be caught off guard when this house goes to sell.
And I will usually then put that in the description, 300 square foot basement, but you also now, because they'll ding you if you don't say where you got that. So I'll say per appraisal.
Right. And so they even have what's called a measure only appraisal. There's that's one option if you're just concerned about square footage being correct, or, as correct
I have
as
one
possible.
that's happening today.
Also, like if somebody's added on or done something, even there are certain houses that, like in the 80s, there was a period where they were building so many houses so fast, they were hiring college kids on the summer to just go out with measuring tapes and measure the outsides of the house. That's where a lot of the square footage just came up.
Really?
And if you haven't sold your house in that amount of time, that square footage is off because, if it had like an inset or, like they're just going by basic boom, 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 boom. So yeah, sometimes it's good to have those updated, and for that.
Okay, so now on to our competitive market
Right.
or comparative market analysis.
Right. So comparative market analysis. I think I've been saying competitive, but it is, you're right. It's comparative market analysis. So we're comparing the market to your house,
The current market.
current market to your house, and analyzing that. That's the word I love. We're analyzing the current market.
So unlike the Zestimate that is just taking AI facts and numbers, we're actually humanizing it and analyzing it.
And unlike the appraisal, which is static, last 6 months closed, we're looking at what is the competition at the moment, what has the pending trend been.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a lot of other more current factors. So I think it's a blend between, I think that what we're doing is more of a blend of all of that, and it's a little bit more shading. Now this is where you really get into, you can have someone who does not know what they're doing, and you need to have someone who really understands what they're doing and what they're looking at, because pricing is so important, as we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But the current trends have really been important in the last year. And it's been hard to read because we've been looking at markets where things sold, in 2024, the beginning of 2024 was still on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then the middle of 24, everything went and just shut down and interest rates jumped up. So then you're looking at when people could afford, let's say $100,000 house and the payment was or $600 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly that $100,000 house is now $800 a month within a month. Okay, so what used to was affordable to this group is no longer affordable. So suddenly you're looking at a demographic information that doesn't match up, but yet you can justify it.
Right.
So that's where the agent who's really living in real time, and appraisers and agents, we try to really work together. And anytime an appraiser calls me, I will answer my phone.
Absolutely.
Know that, appraisers, you can call me. I will answer your questions, because it's only right that we are back and forth and help each other with information. But there's oftentimes the appraisers, especially after 2008, when they got in so much trouble, they are so hesitant to move. But you know what? Houses keep going up in value. If you're only looking at the last 6 months and comparing it, you would be suppressing increases.
Because generally we're about 2 to 3% a year, correct?
But think about that. So that's where the appraisal is an interesting thing, because if it's truly a static of the last 6 months that determines the value here, then nothing ever changes. So you have the cash value, the cash buyers, you have the off market, and those are what bring the market up. And then you have to have some leeway with increasing in prices. So it also probably keeps the market, like we're a natural market. So we kind of value 2-3% a year. Typically, we've had a few jump ups lately in Tulsa, and that's kind of what kept us in that trajectory, which is good because you have less bubbling and bubbles burst. So,
always.
But the comparative market, I think, is so, and I mean, I actually do the pricing for a lot of relocation for other agents whenever. I mean, that is really
You've done that for me.
It's my thing. I love it. And I can drive myself crazy. Our relocation director, I have to call her all the time going, okay, I have spent so much time on this because I don't know. I mean, somebody really overpaid for something a year ago and now they're getting relocated and they have to sell the house. But I'm like, there is no way I can make this match up. And, and then and what's scary is that then you go up against another agent who gives them what they want instead of what the market brings, and you lose that listing sometimes because they go with a higher price. But then you see it and you watch it and you track it, and it always goes to the lower price eventually because the company ends up buying it in that case. But you don't have that most of the time.
Right.
It's you. So if you really need and have to sell something, or really want to, price is so important. And I think that is where you have people like us who really are in the market and doing it. And again, nothing against this, but your aunt who sells real estate and does 2 houses a year for friends, I really don't know that they're the best person right now to be looking and determining your price.
And a strong brokerage will also make a difference. I mean, like if
Yes.
I have a unicorn property, which I seem to be fairly famous for listing the homes that are different than anything else in the area. But if I get really stuck, I'll call Jack and say, hey, okay, let's put our heads together. What does the pricing on this look like? So,
And it is art. It is not science. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of, I think that's what turns, because there's so much science in it that you use to then go, okay, here are all the facts and figures. How do we put that together and make the artistic decision of what makes this house and what is the public thinking and who are the demographic buyers? And it's really important that you look at it. And I will say, this breaks my heart, but there's so many times when I've gone in and told people this is what I think. And then, we've discussed and cussed, and ultimately the public, makes the decision what you price your house. It's your house. And then they'll go in a lot higher, and we'll have to keep pulling back, or we have to, and then a lot of times they sell for less than what you came up with, because then they've spent so many days on the market and struggled. So, it isn't like, we would love to get the bigger number.
Of course.
I mean, it isn't
everybody walks away happy. Well, sellers and real estate agents walk away happy.
And again, you can get that agent. I hope they don't exist, but I know they may, that would be trying to price it so low because they know it's going to fly off like that. That is not what we're talking about. You want to price it just at the sweet spot, or the other thing too is, after the first 7 days, you really need to evaluate, because 7 days, if you haven't gotten a showing, you got an issue.
And I'll give them, okay, I'll even give them 2 weeks, and I'll tell them, if they say I have to list it at this price. Okay. But if in 2 weeks we haven't had any showings, there's an issue here, and it's not your house and it's not location. It's the price.
Yeah.
Especially right now, the price is so important.
But I think you start that conversation on day 7, because, I think, and I'm not saying because I've done this every time. I think, this last year, it has been a wait and see, because, the other thing too, if nothing is selling, because that's the other thing too, you have to look at, and you do have to look at this, you have to look at, if nothing has sold in your area in the last 6 months, then you didn't miss a buyer, because there was no one buying in your area for 6 months.
Right.
So you have to be sensitive to that too. You can't just keep cutting price in order to get there if the price isn't the problem.
Well, and I had a couple of houses that I listed August, September, October of last year, and just sat there. And then once we got to February of this year, like clockwork, they were all getting contracts.
And what happened in February? The interest rate started ticking down a little bit.
I love it when that happens.
But what's weird, they didn't stay ticked down.
No.
They ticked back up
but it didn't stop people.
But it didn't stop people. So I think we've all known there was like this interest sensitivity, but I think what really was happening is people were waiting for permission to go.
Right.
And to do what they needed to do. You have to get past that interest rate thing as a buyer, because the market is going to move beyond you. Like it is. And I don't know when it's going to happen. None of us can say. If we did, we'd be rich and we wouldn't be selling real estate. We'd only be buying and selling.
We'd be on our yacht somewhere.
But you need to, if you want to buy a house, you need to be in the market looking.
Yes.
You do. And if you want to sell your house, you need to be in the market. And that means being visible in the market.
So I want to know how you handle this, because I've a lot of times had sellers who I've told them, let's say the house is $500,000, and they say, oh no, but I need to get 600,000 out of it by the time they, pay all of their stuff. Unfortunately, the buyer doesn't care what the seller has to get out of the house. They only want to pay what that house is worth.
Well, here's the thing. I always think, well, for 25-year-old neck, but I'm not going to have it. Sorry. For anyone who's over 50, you understand that comment. For anyone who's not, you will.
Yeah.
No, sorry. But the thing that I always tell people is you can't expect other people to buy your problem.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's heartbreaking because I understand what you need. And if you need that,
then you may not be
you
able
may
to
not
sell
be,
your house.
it may not be time. No, there's a difference between, it's kind of like we talk about with need and want, right? So if I need, why do you need that extra $100,000? Do you need the extra $100,000 so that you can move to your next one? Or do you need the extra 100? I mean, why do you need that? Is your payoff that high? Like, are you going to have to bring money to the table? All
And
those
some people,
things,
if they
what does
did-
that mean? Are you just, because you have in your mind that you have to make that much money? And
I've seen both. And
if
sometimes
it's that, you need to wait.
And sometimes they've had second and third and fourth mortgages put on the house, and then
there's
they're upside
nothing,
down.
yeah, and that comes back to like, and as an agent, it's important to know there are some jobs that we cannot get done for people. You know, I mean, it's and the other side of it is, it's not a moral issue. It is a moral issue. It's a moral issue. Why would I want to sell that house to somebody for $100,000 over what they should be paying to get you out of hock? I mean, even if we
it's not that buyer's fault.
Even if we could get it, is that the right thing for us to do as professionals?
No.
So oftentimes with that, I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's where you need to try to sell it yourself, because, you know, like that's a big,
and call me in 6 months.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll list it.
I'm very rarely tell people that I think they should do that. I'm not saying that cavalier, but it's like, if truly you are that far, you're that underwater, that may be your only option. So I you know, but in reality, a lot of times people just have in their mind that they need this. The other side of it is, okay, if we're in a horizontal market, in other words, if I'm selling in a market that's difficult to sell in, I'm staying in this market, I'm also buying in a market that's hard to sell in. So I'm gonna sell a little bit below, and what am I going to do when I buy? Buy a little bit below. So you end up in
flush,
flush, yeah. So, but where it's a problem is if I'm selling here and I'm going to a bubble market, you know, and that's where then there's not much we can do about that.
You're selling here and you're buying in Florida.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
You know, and the other thing too is that it's sort of an interesting thing through the years now, because we've had so many, we used to just beg that, oh, if people from California and New York would just sell their $1 million homes and move here and buy $1 million homes. And now they do move here, and we're grateful. I mean, it's been a great thing for our city. But what we're finding is they don't sell their $3 million home and come here and buy a $3 million home. They sell their $3 million home and they come here and buy like $750 to $1 million home, and they put the $2 million in the bank.
Yep.
So it's always been this idea that, well, they'll pay $3 million. They're like, they get here and go, I can have a lot better house for $850 than I had for $3 million. I'll take that. I mean, so
exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of those things we've had to kind of see happen and what the reality is. And that's kind of where we are. But
one of the other things that I've had is the seller wanted to list their house for what the insurance said it would cost to replace their house.
Two different, very, very different valuations.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. So the replacement cost, which please do the best you can to get replacement cost and acceleration on your insurance, because it is shocking how much it costs to rebuild a house.
We just had that in Manford, where they had all the fires and people didn't do that, and now they can't rebuild.
And flood insurance, your insurance does not cover you for flood unless you have flood insurance. I know that sounds like most people are going, but some people don't know that. You cannot assume that if your house floods that you're covered if you do not have flood insurance. And there's so all of that is important. So the cost value makes no difference. That is not how value is arrived at. And I don't.
We ended up with an offer exactly what I told her the house was worth.
And I think that's where you have to really educate people and say, well, where are you coming? I mean, if they say my insurance says it's worth this, then you look at it and go, cost approach is not the same. That's like replacement cost approaches. That is how much it's going to cost us to come in here and rebuild it. The only thing about that you sometimes can get away with that is because it's taking the land out of the formula.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're taking the land out of the formula and you say, well, it's going to cost 300,000 to rebuild this, and it's in a neighborhood where the lots go for 150 or 100, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
you might luck out and come into that number, but that's also it's a misuse of information, because that is the insurance. We talked about the appraisal being for the bank to cover themselves to be able to resell the house. That is the insurance companies protecting themselves on making sure they get enough money to, when they have to rebuild it, that they've gotten what they want to cover that.
With an uptick in lumber costs and 4 times what it was maybe when the house was
And that's
built.
what we were talking about earlier. I don't know if it was this week or last week when we were talking about that the people are now, everything has gotten so much more expensive. Insurance has gotten crazy expensive compared to what it used to be. So even though people are on 3% interest rates and they're not wanting to move, a lot of them are having to start thinking about the moving process, because utilities have gone up, their insurance has gone up, cost of living, just buying groceries has gone up. So suddenly, yeah, it's an affordable house payment for this house, but I could actually scale down and make my life easier monthly.
Yes. So anyway, this kind of gives you an idea of evaluating a house, figuring out its value. There are different ways, but generally the CMA
and the appraiser are going to be much more precise, and they're going to be more specific to your house, and they're going to have all the shading that you need. But it's also funny because we walk in typically to a listing not having seen the inside of the house, and we have all of our data, and then people want us to give you a price, and that isn't easy for most realtors to do on the spot. So I think there's nothing wrong with taking a little bit of time once you've actually seen the property, or your agent's seen the property, to let them then evaluate the list price.
Yes.
It's difficult because you go in wanting to sign everything and do your job, but it's like sometimes you walk in and go, wait, this is a little different than I thought, good and bad.
Yes, I was about to say that could skew
go either
way.
way. So it's like if I've come in with the preconceived notion that your house is worth $100,000, and I walk in and you've got like literally gold plated everything, then I'm not going to just have you sign on the dotted line for 100,000 because that's what I came in with the paperwork for. I'm going to say, wait, I think we can get you more money here. Or the opposite, you've not updated in 30 years.
Which is sometimes hard for somebody who's lived there for 30 years to understand.
Yeah. And sometimes we go in and say, you know what? You can spend $5,000 to increase your value by 15 or 20, and you should before we market it. Or stop the bleed. You've put way too much money in this that you're not going to get out, and people tend to make decisions with their money on their house that don't really translate to adding value.
If you have things like piers, a new roof, certain things like that, definitely do those prior to putting it on the market.
Yeah. And if you have a chandelier that you're going to take with you, if you can, I know it's not always, but it is best to take it because it will make people want it.
Yeah. Literally somebody will walk in and say, I will buy this house because of that chandelier. And it's somebody's, great grandmother's chandelier. So before you put it on the market, take that sucker down and put something else nice
and
up.
I understand some people don't want to do that because they're not sure that the house will sell and then they've taken it down. I mean, but if you are going to sell that house for sure, and you want, it's just easier and less negotiation, or the drapes or the, the things that you want, it's better to take them with you.
Yes.
It really is. And even when you stage, you need to state what's going to go away. If people come in and they put drapes up for staging, okay, those now have become according to the contract, a part of the house unless you state that they are not.
I've never had anybody put up drapes for staging.
They'll put up they'll put up panels and things, and it looks great, but it's like those panels are not a part of this deal.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Well, all right. Anything you're streaming right now that you're really enjoying?
There's something coming up that looks really kind of awful, but it looks good. It's about a British man and his wife, and it's like they were serial killers.
Oh, wow.
And it's like a documentary about, and it's terrible. Like they figured out they were, like they figured out because they murdered their daughter or something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like really like dark. So I'm excited.
You're excited.
I don't know why. I really don't. It's sort of funny because there's so many friends who love horror. John loved horror movies. Kristen loves horror movies. I hated horror movies. I was like, why make a movie like that? Now I've become where I really like them.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I used to love them when I was in high school.
I don't like too slashery, but yeah.
So I'm going to go back in the bank because they're filming again. Bosch. If you have not watched,
oh my gosh, they're filming again.
They are.
Wow.
So Bosch is a series of books about a LA detective. I think it's LA. Yeah, LA detective, and the several series. And then it was so popular, they ended up spinning it off where he was a private detective and his daughter is now in the police force. And that's called Bosch Legacy. Well, I just saw LA had a big Bosch day and announced that they are coming out with a new season. So I don't know exactly what this one will be about. I mean, clearly he's now a private detective, but so Bosch is coming back. I'm very excited. Amazon Prime.
That's cool. That's very cool. What I've been coming more increasingly doing is just going through ChatGPT and Google. And I mean, I've been less streaming and more just going.
There you go.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And you are churning out marketing material like no other mother. I mean, it's awesome.
You know what? I've really been building it up and building it up and building it up so I could kind of have like a whole thing ready to go. And so, yeah, it's fun. It's really exciting.
Aren't you glad I took you down that AI path almost 2.5 years ago?
Crazy. And like we were saying, it's sort of crazy because right now, do you watch, Black Mirror?
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is so interesting because of like all the stuff that we're into, because it's like, it's the dark side of what we're into.
The one with Selma Hayek where they...
Oh, no, the new season. Have you seen the new season?
When I was with Peyton, when he had his wisdom teeth out, I think we watched 3 of the episodes.
Did you watch the one with the couple where she is in an accident and has
No, I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black Mirror, this would not be a Todd thing to watch. He would be out the door. But if you like sci-fi, if you like things that
challenges
kind of plays with your mind, taking things that maybe you haven't even thought of being the next stage of...
What was the very first one is with Dallas? Oh gosh, her dad was Opie.
Dallas Bryce Howard.
Yeah, so she plays where it's a society where if you don't get a certain number of likes,
yes,
then you become an undesirable, and so you have to constantly go around being like making sure everyone likes you. It is so dark and so interesting.
And the one with Selma Hayek and
where everything's in real time.
The daughter on Schitt's Creek. By the way, I did not say the cuss word. That is the name of the show.
Good show.
Need to put one of my favorite comedies of all time. But it's those two in it, and they AI an actress, and it's very interesting.
And it's where you sign off that they can use your life. All those things where you just sign, yes, I agree, and you don't read it. And it's like, you better read what you're agreeing to.
They just did that with a bunch of actors in Hollywood that are like the street crowd, the background, and took all kinds of videos and pictures of them. So they don't have to pay them. They can just put them on screen in the film.
Yeah. And, so many of my friends are actors and actresses, and I do feel for them because it's really like, it's scary what they can do and what they will do. And my gosh, you can go and create images of humans that don't exist. It's
Oh yeah.
It's going to change things for sure. For sure. Maybe we'll just have more. I mean, my gosh, it feels like there's so much out there that, like you're talking about streaming, kind of like I pay for Netflix and Amazon, and I want Max, but I'm like, you just keep going Hulu, and I mean, like, you just start paying for all those. It's so much more than cable was.
I have it all. It's less than my cable bill, but I have YouTube TV and then all of the streaming services, because there's something I like
YouTube,
on
because I have DirecTV and it's expensive.
Oh, I love YouTube. I think it's like $80
That's
a
a
month.
lot less than I pay.
Don't hold me to that, but yeah, by the time then you put your streaming services, it still wasn't my cable bill of $350 or whatever it was.
All I watch on is CNBC anyways. Like, that is literally all I watch on regular TV, and occasionally The Voice or, like those, but most really I'm just, if I could just have CNBC like on my TV, I'd probably be okay.
Yeah.
I know I'm a dork, but that is the truth.
Yeah. All right. We have gone down the rabbit hole of streaming. So what are we talking about next week?
You know what? We're talking about our new Skype.
Zoom.
Sorry.
Zoom, yeah.
Zoom or Skype, whatever. We're going to do a home buyer education series where people can sign up and come in and Zoom with us once and everybody else and do a full workbook. And whenever we're finished, then you'll either be ready to buy a house or you'll be really close and you'll be working towards buying a house. So it's going to cover everything. Yeah. We're excited. Yeah.
We're excited. All right. Well, guys, have a great week and we will talk with you next week.
See you guys.